Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, we explore all aspects of the paranormal and the unknown, from the past to the present. We seek out the hidden patterns that connect different aspects of the paranormal together. And I have found that it's especially fun to have repeat guests on the show, and that's what we're going to do tonight. So let me get started with the intros. Author, historian, paranormal researcher Bob Antone discusses the idea of cultural clairvoyance surrounding pop culture and film sites throughout the Seattle area. The films The Vanishing, Twin Peaks, Twilight, Harry and the Hendersons, including the birth of the Men in Black, to the childhood home of Ted Bundy, all provide fascinating discussions regarding life imitating art, art imitating life, and parallel universes within the framework of film, television, popular books, and more. Bob and his wife Laura lead historical and paranormal tours throughout the state of Washington. From Bigfoot to UFO sightings, missing time, and cursed and haunted locations, this husband and wife team collects stories from hidden corners of the Pacific Northwest. Laura is a registered member of the Dene, did I say that correctly? Dene, First Nations, thank you. As a result, their company focuses on history and cultural understanding from an indigenous point of view, namely that we are all related. And also, today we have Liam Cupkovic. Liam is the owner of Afterlife Solutions, working mostly as a medium in investigations, although he does enjoy the tech side of things as well. What excites him the most about ghost hunting is that you get together with like-minded people investigating the scariest locations, gathering evidence to prove that the paranormal exists. Everybody, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Hey.
Hello.
Good evening.
And yes, and it is evening, definitely for you. You're what time is it for you there, Liam?
It's 7:10 in the UK.
And Bob and Laura, it is in the afternoon for you guys, right? Oh no, morning.
Yeah, it's in the morning, 11:10.
Okay, and so I'm somewhere in between. So we've got quite a few hours stretched between us. So today we're going to talk about, you guys have both done research and have experiences to talk about. But first, I want to remind people that last year, Bob, Laura, and I were on along with Zelia Edgar, and we did a show on the High Strangeness Factor about Twin Peaks. And it was a lot of fun because when you get several Twin Peaks geeks together talking about that show and everything it relates to, it's really a lot of fun. And also, I don't know how long ago it was, Liam, but Bob and I were on your show, the Afterlife Solutions. Is that link still available?
It is still available. It was in December last year.
December, okay. Boy, okay. I guess I'm getting old. It doesn't seem that long ago. Okay, so well, let's just get started with Bob and Laura. Well, first of all, let's go back a little bit. Let's remind people about how you guys got involved in what you do, the paranormal and so forth. What got you both started and then brought you together?
Well, Laura and I met in high school. We actually dated in 1991, and we met in art class. And then we didn't see each other for 20 years. And then we reconvened in 2011. And so we've always had a connection and an interest in the supernatural. But we also, I worked a lot with, the Native community and different cultural communities here in the Seattle area, including the Hmong, a lot of the Salish tribes. And then because of Laura's background, we have a lot of interest in anthropology and spirituality and cultural ceremonies. And so we've always had that connection, and we just followed that path starting when we reconvened in 2011. And every year we've gotten more and more into presenting history and leading tours and educating the public regarding, I guess, secrets and secret information, obscure information of this area. So that's the general rundown right there.
So did you guys the spark that got you into the paranormal? Were you experiencers as young people, or was it just something that captured your interest?
Actually, yeah. When I was growing up, my family traveled quite a bit, back and forth through Europe and Africa and through Canada and the U.S.
Wow.
And just the experiences that I ended up just just going through, along with my parents, it just kind of sparked an interest ever since I was a child. So,
was it in relation to like a haunted house kind of a situation, or?
It was more so that there was somebody that was actually possessed.
Oh.
My family actually was a big part of the Catholic Church. They did a lot of missionary work in Africa, parts of Africa.
Okay.
So there was a moment where my parents were they ended up getting some people from the parish that, they were saying that they're having trouble with their little boy. So they ended up going to their house, and I just ended up, they didn't tell me any of this until I overheard them. You know how kids are.
Right.
They eavesdrop on their parents,
Right.
So I mean, I didn't know what happened. All I know is that my parents seemed unusually, they were just acting a little strange when they got back from visiting these people. And I guess they were talking about possession, and they were talking about that this boy needed to be preyed upon, and that they had witnessed a gush of cold wind, and just horrible growling, and they just couldn't believe what they witnessed. And I was just overhearing a conversation that they were having. And then it wasn't until, I think it was probably 2012, my mom ended up bringing it up again. And I just, I've always remembered that whole thing, but we had a conversation about it. And, it was just one of those many different times where I would just overhear my parents talking about it, mostly my mother. So
it was something that was not an unusual conversation in your home, talking about these things.
right, most of the time, my dad is more of the logical person. He's a civil engineer, so he tried to keep logic and science to it. That he kind of tried to be able to convince himself of the fact that, well, there's all these other factors that may have happened and could be, it could attribute to, a logical outcome. Right. Whereas my mom was more of the whole spiritual side of it. And it wasn't until about, 2012 that, the conversations between my mom about ghosts and, spirits and all that, that was kind of when we started talking about it. So, I mean, it was, they kind of tried to be able to shelter me, I guess, when I was growing up.
I understand.
Yeah.
And Bob, what about you? What were some of the things that that triggered it for you as a young man?
Yeah, we live in an area here where there's a lot of activity, but I think what's really started it was a trip to the antique store down the road, and my sister convinced my mom to buy a Ouija board. And I know this will connect to Liam. This will connect to Liam in a little while. But when my mom brought that Ouija board home, that's when a lot of the phenomenon started at our house. And my sister to this day and I have a connection because of that Ouija board. And my whole life, I've been an experiencer. You could say that playing around with it and not really knowing what we're doing and where the Ouija board came from probably added to opening something, a doorway, to, you know, certain things. And yes, we've been experiencing ghost phenomenon and very strange activity our whole life. So it started with that Ouija board right down the street. So yeah.
Well, that's a good jump start there. What about you, Liam? What triggered it all for you?
So I experienced spirits right from a very early young age. I was a child, and I used to see people, animals. I actually saw my grandmother. She was the first spirit that I actually seen. I never got a chance to meet her in life, because she passed away just before I was born. But she used to come and visit me at 3 a.m. every morning. And the room, even in like the middle of summer when it used to be the most hottest summers, it used to go ice cold at that time. And I used to see her floating. The only way I could describe it, because I was a child, I used to say there's a lady floating at the end of my bed. And when my mum, I used to go and wake my mum up. My mum used to come in and she used to go, "There's absolutely nothing in here." But the room was still ice cold and she could feel the temperature change. But that's when I first experienced it. But as time progressed, I used to tell people things as well, just random people that I've only just met, about their loved ones that are passed over, personal things that are really personal between them and that loved one, and things like that. So it kind of progressed from there. But I came from a different background where my parents was more of a logical perspective. They weren't very spiritual at all. So they kind of used to say that I was imagining it and I had imaginary friends and things like that.
So they always had a rational explanation.
Yeah.
Did they ever come around to think that that you were actually experiencing something anomalous?
Eventually, when I got older, they realized, looking back on things and the information that I told people, eventually they thought, how would he know that information? Because we've never spoke about that and things like that. So they start to think differently now. But growing up through that kind of experience was like, it can be very lonely at times, because you're seeing things other people are not. And you know, there's a borderline between crazy and paranormal, I guess. Most people thought you were crazy.
Well, people thought I was crazy just because of the weird stuff I was in, you know, science fiction, and I was the space guy. You know, I had a map of the solar system back in the days when Pluto used to actually still be a planet. That's how long ago it was. But I was mentioning, Laura mentioned the exorcism. I've been doing a lot of reading of, there's a Dr. Donald Omond, who I don't know what church he was associated with. I can't remember right now. But he was involved in exorcising the Loch Ness, Nessie, also the Bermuda Triangle, and something he called black spots or vortexes or whatever. It's just kind of interesting, but that's another subject. Yeah, for me, it was I was just I had read the books of Frank Edwards, the great anthologies where he talked about the Flatwoods Monster and UFOs and Bigfoot and so forth. Yeah, I never had any kind of experiences as a kid, because when I was upstairs alone in my room, everybody knows that if you hide under your covers, they magically protect you from monsters and all kinds of spiritual oddities. So I was perfectly safe. So Bob and Laura, tell us about some of the investigations you've been doing recently, and some of the things you wanted to talk about on the show today.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with something within the last couple years. And our story begins on January 20th, 2019. So we took a group of folks up to Exit 38, Olali State Park, and we were discussing the history of Bigfoot sightings and strange supernatural phenomenon in that area. And there's a long history that goes back. And there was a certain point where I used a drum that was given to me, and I sang a song, and I had permission that day. It was actually June 20th, which is not only David Lynch's birthday, but it was also an elder of Snoqualmie tribe, their birthday. And it was an elder that had just passed away. And she loved Bigfoot. She absolutely loved the subject of Saskets. And that is how you say it in this area. So I sang a song in honor of the territory. I sang a song basically acknowledging that we would be visiting and coming through, kind of asking permission and thanking the beings, the supernatural beings there. And something very funny happened. Behind my back, you could hear the crunching of footsteps, and it sounded like something large, very heavy and large, was behind me on the hill. Now there was a crowd of people there at this event, and some of them reacted right away and like, "Ooh, oh my God!" So there were witnesses that sensed and heard and saw this phenomenon. They were witnesses there that day. Now the thing about it, in January, all the leaves, they're kind of, the branches are bare, so you can see. This is the thing, is you can see the hillside. There's not a lot of debris. Like in the summertime, there's a lot of greenery that would get in the way, but this time you can see clearly. So you could hear the sound of something stomping around behind my back during this special song, but you could not see it. It was almost like the movie Predator, when the invisible alien, is moving about the jungle, and you could, kind of see it, but not. It was sort of similar to that. So anyway,
but you did see kind of a vague blurring of the scenery a little bit, like that Predator effect.
Kind of in the sense that the branches were separating in that area where kind of a large figure was, but it was invisible. Like there was no large body figure, but there were witnesses and everybody heard it. Okay, so fast forward. Now this is very interesting. Fast forward 2 years. This was January 25th, 2021. Now we got a request by a couple sisters. It was Natalie and Emily Campano that came out from Seattle, and they wanted to do an article. Natalie was writing an article about Sasquatch and the paranormal and the Snoqualmie Valley. And so we ended up at the same location. We ended up at exit 38. We were walking around the woods. We came around the corner and we came to the spot where 2 years prior, I had sang this song, and this invisible thing was behind my back. So as I was telling Natalie and Emily the story, we got a message that exact moment an elder had passed away, like she died that exact moment I was telling the story. Now here's where it gets kind of strange and very interesting. That elder was the same elder that took the drum that I had performed on 2 years prior, and she took it down to Oklahoma, and she met with Charles Chibity, who was the last living code talker who was there at the beaches of Normandy.
Wow.
On D-Day. He was actually there on D-Day on the beaches of Normandy, and he blessed that drum. He sang 4 songs over that drum that I used that day in 2019. So that elder that had taken my drum down to Charles Chibity passed away at that exact moment that I was telling the story 2 years later, standing there with Emily and Natalie Campano. Now, this is kind of fun. Just a little side note with pop culture. Natalie was in the movie, let's see, it came out in 2016, Abominable. And it's about Sasquatch. She's in a B movie. It's awesome. It's just a great movie. And there's a lot of famous actors in it that are, you have Matt McCoy, Jeffrey Combs, Lance Henriksen.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Rex Lynn. He was in Twin Peaks. You have...
Wait a minute. Rex Lynn, what part did he play in Twin Peaks?
I think he was in Twin Peaks. I think he was in one of the he was in The Return. He was a very short episode in The Return. Then Paul Gleason, Paul Gleason. And anyway, if you look up,
people must know Lance Henriksen. I mean, Aliens, Pumpkinhead, Millennium. I mean, a very, very familiar character actor face. But go ahead.
Yeah, so here we are. We're standing with Natalie Campano, who was in the movie Abominable, and
Right.
it's about being attacked by Sasquatch. In this case, it was in Northern California, the movie set. And we're talking about this phenomenon, and then it's just starting to get really spooky. Now, her sister Emily, you might recognize her. She's a journalist from Fox News. Well, she also happens to be a huge true crime history buff. She loves paranormal. She loves UFOs. In fact, whenever she can, she reports on the latest UFO updates, information. She loves Bigfoot, Sasquatch, all that. So they're standing here and their eyes are huge. They got to chill up their spine. We got to chill. Hair standing on end, and we get this message from that this elder had just passed away. Now, here's where it gets even stranger, and I'll just do another maybe 30 seconds, and I'll see what you folks think of this, because this is kind of starting a conversation about the reality of Sasquatch and the interdimensional theory. So here's the thing. So on January 25th, and we didn't even plan it. That was the same day, January 25th, 2021. But on January 25th, 1976, in that same location, Langston and French discovered footprints along the South Fork of the Snoqualmie River on January 25th, 1976. And it didn't hit the news until January 27th, 1976. And then it was all over the news. And then all of the Sasquatch hunters from all over the world were just, their eyes were on North Bend. They were like, oh my God, we're going to. And so a lot of them came out. A lot of well-known people came out and investigated this famous incident of these footprints that were found in the sandy riverbank along the Snoqualmie River. And that happened to be January 25th. Now, on January 27th, the Bigfoot killer in Detroit, Michigan, there's a guy called the Bigfoot killer. He was picked up for suspicion of murder. And the reason they call him the Bigfoot killer is because his hands and feet were abnormally large. And he was detained on January 27th, the same day and the same year, 1976, that the Bigfoot prints found along the Snoqualmie River hit the media all over the world. And on January 25th, the law enforcement in Detroit, Michigan was getting ready to arrest the Bigfoot killer. And you're thinking, well, what the hell? Why are these things all connected? So what I'm suggesting to you, and this came from Ralph Bennett, who was a carver that lived at our house. He said that the world of Saskets, or the world of Sasquatch, and I said this on Zelia's show, they show themselves when innocence is in danger. And so he explained to me when children or women are in danger, that they will send a message. Now, on Zelia's show, we talked about the Green River Killer. We talked about Ted Bundy and how there are Sasquatch sightings very close in proximity and time period to some serial killer activity. Well, in this case, we have a killer in Detroit, Michigan, and you're thinking, what? That's like all the way across the country. Well, what I'm suggesting is that not only is Sasquatch interdimensional, but also Sasquatch, the phenomenon, if you're going to look at it in a traditional way, it also defies linear time. And so what do you folks think of that wild story that I just shared with you?
Liam, what do you think?
I think it's all connected in the sense of like Bob was saying there about serial killers and things like that. But can Sasquatch move that quickly between, being one part of the country and the other? That's all to do with time, isn't it? That's a completely different, I suppose, scenario and kettle of fish. Yeah, I do believe there's something out there that is, not human, probably a lot bigger than us and a lot different to us. Whether we can find it, actually, physically find it and see it, with our own eyes, who knows? But because there's so many things that have been found, like Bob was saying, their footprints, also trees moving and things like that. So Sasquatch is definitely something to look out for, but whether he's big, brown, and hairy, and I don't know, 20 foot tall, who knows?
Well, it's interesting that several researchers well-known researchers that started out looking at Bigfoot or Sasquatch as a flesh and blood creature have moved away from that. When you talk about Bigfoot moving quickly from one place to another, there's a story that Tom Powell tells. He wrote a book called The Locals and also a follow-up book, a book I'm going to be delving into. I'm supposed to be speaking on Bigfoot coming up at a convention in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the about the middle of July, and I'm going to be speaking on the stranger aspects of Bigfoot. And you know how the division goes in the Bigfoot community, flesh and blood to interdimensional, or whatever term you want to use. There's never the twain shall meet. A lot of nasty rhetoric that goes back and forth sometimes. But Tom Powell told a story, and I forget where he was, but he was way up north somewhere, and he had been doing the tree knocking and so forth. And I don't think he had any success, but he drove 3 hours south back to his home. He steps outside his car and hears a response, he assumes, to his tree knocking. Now, it could be somebody that he knew was lurking in the woods to hoax him. I don't know. But, you know, there are some, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jack Kiwani Lapsaritis, or is it Lapsaritis? He wrote, Bob, he wrote a book called Psychic Sasquatch and a follow-up called The Sasquatch People. He gets really into the stranger aspects and talks about the space people and the Sasquatch people. And it's interesting because there was a retired professor from that spoke at Michigan MUFON one time that basically a lot of his findings paralleled Kiwani's findings, and they're pretty out there. But some of the same things you're talking about, where he would take photographs of a specific area, and then you could see that there were subtle changes in the branches and so forth, as if something unseen was moving through there. So I have come to believe that there are some that Bigfoot is not simply, and that so many of these cryptids are just not simply undocumented creatures that we don't know about. There seems to be a very, very high strangeness aspect to this. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the research of Stan Gordon. He wrote the book Silent Invasion. And in 73, 74, he documented all kinds of Bigfoot sightings, but very strange ones. In one case, a woman shot one, saw this thing on her porch, called it a gorilla. She shoots it point blank with her shotgun. It disappears in a hail of sparks. Also, they had seen a lot of strange lights in the sky. So UFOs, or whatever these lights were connected with Bigfoot. So I have to tell you, Bob, that I don't find these stories all that strange, because there are so many of them that seem to parallel.
Yeah, and I guess what we're suggesting is, just like when people refer to the crop circle phenomenon, where there are messages that are being delivered and people aren't sure if it's from another dimension or if it's from, outer space somewhere. What we're suggesting is that the synchronicity of Bigfoot sightings and events, across time and across, vast distances, but how we're matching up those dates, it's a message that's being delivered that, like, we're noticing patterns and saying, okay, someone is trying to tell us something, and we're putting the pieces together. Obviously, we don't know the entire story, but based on some of the traditional knowledge that's been shared with us, and then some of the synchronicity that we're finding, it's like, okay, there's a message, and we're receiving it, we're listening. Instead of thinking that they're unrelated, we're saying, okay, this happened for a reason, and we're listening. So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, putting in a strange sort of feel out there, do you think all cryptids, are they actually the same creature? Do you think they could be something along the lines of connected to the paranormal universe by a shapeshifter or something like that?
Well, if you're asking me, I think there are many variations, in the other world, if you want to call it that. There's different shapes and sizes, just like we have different people in this universe. We have tall, skinny, fat, short, all different types of personalities. We have all different types of entities. And yes, I believe that there is a connection. And in this part of the world, and I'll repeat it again, people believe in that the Sasketch lives in another dimension of reality next to ours. So you could interpret that as a parallel universe. So for sure, I think that there's a connection to the spirit world as well. So I do believe they're all connected. Yeah.
Do you think that when people will throw the term interdimensional around a lot,
Yeah.
do we need to, are we talking about a physical creature that can somehow slide into this other realm or universe or dimension, whatever way you want to label it? Or is it, do they actually materialize and dematerialize? It almost seems that Ron Moorhead, in his book Quantum Bigfoot, is suggesting that the physical structure changes. If I get him right. So what is your guys' feeling about the idea of interdimensional? What's really going on, or do you have an idea what's really going on with these entities?
Liam, you want to answer that first?
Sure. So interdimensionals for myself, I do believe they do exist. What happens in them, I have absolutely no idea how they work 100%. But my idea of it is where they can move across sort of space and time. So they can be in one location 1 second and appear in another somewhere else, completely, whether it's across the country or even in a different absolute area altogether. Time's a funny thing, because obviously we've already mentioned it at the top of the show there that we're in 3 different time zones already. So something that's happening at Bob's side is obviously still morning. Something that's happening there, obviously it's potentially already happened over here this morning. It's really strange how interdimensionals work. So I do believe they are out there. I do believe they do exist. But I don't believe that anyone fully understands how they work or why they do what they do. But it can lead. I believe there's more questions than answers when dealing with those sort of things. Some things are sometimes best left alone, and time is definitely one of them.
So I guess maybe it's hard to define what's really going on, but is it safe to say that trying to look at these things as merely creatures that remain hidden in the Northwest or wherever? I mean, they're seen all over Ohio as well. That a strict flesh and blood explanation doesn't seem to fit what people are reporting.
I don't think. Well, it all depends, really. I mean, obviously, people have seen different things, but I'm more of a spiritual, so I rather think it's something with probably less physical but more spiritual attachments, if that makes sense. So they are able to similar things like they'll be able to move objects. So obviously, like Bob said earlier, things like moving through the trees and parting the trees and things like that, the branches, etc. So they'll be able to move physical objects. It's just that they're not physical themselves. That's what I personally believe.
Bob and Laura, what about the dogman phenomena out in for Native American tradition and belief? Is there anything that you can tell us that you know of that would categorize or explain the dogman phenomena?
Well, as far as connecting it to ancient stories, we can do that. So down in the area called Tolt, and they also call it Carnation, the origin stories involve 5 wolf brothers, and they were like wolf hybrid, half human, half wolf.
Right.
And the word Tolt is tied in with that ancient story. And so all around here, we have a connection to, I would say, I don't know about, they call them dog men, but they're more like wolf men, half wolf, half human. And then also there's a place very far back called Ernie's Grove. And if you go up, they call it County Line Road. There's a lot of strange things that happen up there, a lot of sightings, a lot of really strange things happen up there. But people in this area know there are ancient graveyards up there, ancient remains that are buried. And so there are guardians that are said to guard that area way back in the woods. I mean, it is remote. Oh my God. But some of the sightings back there are wolf people walking upright. I've heard that before. My son and his friends saw something unusual. They think maybe it was a bear that had mange. But there are other people that have seen, creatures up there. And I myself was driving back from that remote area in the middle of the night. When I was a teenager, I was with my friend. We were out in the woods. We decided to go, as teenagers do, drive as far back as we could in the middle of the night. And we were driving back on that county line road. And just as we were coming out to the main road back to Snoqualmie, North Bend, a large white bird looked almost like I want to say a 40, 50-foot wingspan, something I did not recognize, but it was bright white. It flew right over our car. It was something I'd never seen before. I mean, I guess you could call that maybe a thunderbird sighting. But the thing about it is that these wolf hybrids and these guardians up the county line road, one thing they have in common is the color white. I've heard the tales being that they're glowing with white light, or they're white in color. And that is a common look for these guardian figures. So this bird that flew over, even though it was a bird, it was bright white. And I've heard of other people seeing these I don't know, beings, these guardians up in that area. So that's our local version, I guess, of the dogmen. Is
Well, there's been so many of these sightings that people have come forth with, and this is another. So many people have seen these things, but it's just unthinkable that they could be physical creatures that have remained that elusive, and we don't ever have a carcass or whatever. I think there's a tradition with some of these dogmen, or whatever you want to call them, that are guardians. You mentioned the guardian word for some of the ancient mounds. And I know that Linda Godfrey, who is the person that wrote the Beast of Bray Road and several other books to follow about this phenomena, she, by happenstance one time, was looking at a book on Wisconsin mounds in southern Wisconsin. And she happened to notice that if she overlaid them, they would overlap with some of the clusters of the dogman reports she had been receiving, almost perfectly. And it's interesting because they were select mounds that they were overlapping. The panther mound was one, and a panther mound is just very if you were to draw like the outline of a panther, with the head, a little bump for the ears, and the feet and the tail, but then also the water spirit mounds, and those are traditionally look a little bit smaller in size, but they have a long pointed tail that comes out. But for some reason, these reports were clustering in that same area. And I've been watching the TV show on the Skinwalker Ranch, the season 2, The Secret of the Skinwalker Ranch, I think it's called. And so I revisited the book that was written some years ago called The Hunt for the Skinwalker. And that was by Colin Kelleher, who was a scientist who worked with the National Institute for Discovery Science when it was owned by Robert Bigelow. And also George Knapp was the co-author. Well, one of the reports that Sherman, the guy that had owned the ranch that sold it to Bigelow, and the Shermans were experiencing all kinds of bizarre phenomena. He saw something that looked like it had sort of a head of a dog, sort of a body of a hyena, and a big bushy tail, almost like a oversized foxtail. And this thing was attacking the horses, was nipping at their legs and causing all kinds of disruption. He went to chase it. It ran up the ridge and it disappeared. So if this story is true, if his perception was correct, you have something that was causing physical harm to the horses, yet it vanished into thin air or another dimension or whatever. The thing that strikes me about, as you guys may know, that I've always been interested in these high strangeness areas where all this stuff seems to come together. And I'm going to ask you guys about that as well. But if you look at the Skinwalker Ranch, and especially the book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, which I think a lot of people are saying it's all made up, and I just don't buy that. But if you isolate certain aspects of it, you could say, well, it's ET, right? Because they see UFOs on the property. They see something like a triangle craft coming out of what looks like a hole in space, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you look at the whole broad spectrum, they had things like that predator effect, like you mentioned before, Bob. They have disembodied voices, strange languages. They have classic poltergeist phenomena, shadow people, and so forth. So, how do we process that? I don't know, but let me do my little intermission here. You are listening to the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward, and today we are talking to Bob and Laura Antone and Liam Cupkovic. Almost got it that time, Liam. About their research and experiences in the paranormal. Liam, let's go to you and talk about some of the recent things that you've been investigating.
Okay, so we actually did an investigation a few weeks back. It was so quite recent. We went to an old priory. It used to be a priory. It's just ruins now, unfortunately. But we went there. We set up a few equipment, such as REM pods, K2s, cat balls. We don't use temperature guns because it's outdoors. So outdoors, obviously, temperature drops at night anyway. But we just set a little bit up, and we had the EVP recorder, and it was quite interesting. We took it in turns to ask random questions, and one of my friends, who is also as a trainee medium at the moment, he just asked a random question. He says, "Can you tell us about the fire, please?" And this voice comes over the EVP. We had to play it back, obviously. We still got the evidence. We popped it on our page as well. A voice came back, and it was a really deep voice, and it had an accent as well. So, and it's definitely none of our voices, because everyone was pure silent at that point. And it just says, it just told us to shut up. It kind of hit a nerve with that, and K2 started to go off after that. Also, the REM pod went off as well. It was kind of telling us to leave it alone at that point, which was quite an experience at the time. It's quite chilling. We all went cold when we heard the voice. It was pretty impressive, but also kind of chilling at the same time. We was really happy with that evidence. I mean, that's a vital thing, obviously, when we go out to these investigations, to try and pick up as much evidence as we can, because obviously evidence then proves to other people that they are out there. So that was definitely an interesting investigation that we've done. But one of the best investigations that I've ever done is going back to 2015. So it's a little while ago now. It's about 6 years ago. We went to 30 East Drive, which is home to the most violent poltergeist in European history. And when we went there, we literally had absolutely everything kicking off. And when I say everything, we had objects moving, objects breaking, smashing.
Really? Is there a name by which that incident is known by that people might recognize it?
There's a big article on it, and also there's a book out called 30 East Drive. Also, okay. There is a film out there as well that was produced by the actual owner of the house now, Bill Bungie. It's called When the Lights Went Out. So there's a movie on that as well. There's been TV series film there and things like that as well, just for they call it entertainment purposes and things like that, just because they can't officially say it's real, if that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, there's loads of things out there on it, and it is one of my favorite places to go because I've had some amazing experiences there. I mean, I've seen also at that time as well in 2015. We did an experiment in one of the bedrooms. We were just standing around in a circle, just connecting hands, and we asked the poltergeist to step forward, and he did actually step forward, and what he did, we all 8 people seen this, so you can't unsee it when you've seen it. This girl, actually, you've seen her feet lift off the ground, and he threw her across the room, which was quite impressive, but also scary for her at the same time.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely amazing. And things like that. That's the kind of things that I want to go in and find and see and also experience for myself. Because it's moments like that that actually that actually intrigue me, and I want to know exactly how it's done and why it's done, and
So you're trying to keep a presence of mind, so you're observing what's going on and can talk about it afterwards.
yeah, definitely. I mean, as a medium, I look for actual solid evidence, because I mean, anyone can say, anyone can walk into a room and say, oh, I've seen this or seen that, but if you've got nothing to back it up, then people are going to start thinking, like I mentioned earlier, that you're crazy or something like that. Bob can vouch as well. He's experienced a couple of things from myself when we've had conversations. He's asked me to look at objects and things like that, and I've told him certain bits of information that he's never even discussed with me, and things like that. So it's a skill. It can be taught, mediumship. It can be taught, but I do believe that everyone's born with it. It's just that we close that side off of ourselves when life gets in the way. Because obviously life takes over. You especially from a child. You go through stages, grow up, and things like that. But you kind of get blindsided by life.
Right.
Um,
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. You go.
I just wondered, you're in a situation like that, and so I wonder what it'd be like for me. The only I've mentioned this on the show before. The only strange thing I've had happen to me was I had gone out to the TNT area north of Point Pleasant one night alone. I came back, went across the Ohio River to my motel. I opened up the door, and the TV set turned on by itself, and then started flipping through channels steadily. And I never, I don't ever have anything happen to me. So I just kind of looked at it, and I didn't do the things I should have to check to see if maybe the controller button was pressed in, or all the logical things. But at least I didn't run screaming into the next county. That's about all I can say. But it really took me by surprise, because I just don't. I've never experienced anything. So but I have always wanted, or at least think I want to be on guard, that if I am in a situation where, how many people have seen something, a cryptid or whatever, and the camera is hanging around their neck or in their hand, and they're standing there slack-jawed, and they don't take a picture or even try, So I guess I'm just going to ask all of you guys: is there anything you do? I mean, I know you guys, Bob and Laura, had that strange incident with the whatever it was, that invisible entity, and Liam, you were in this situation with poltergeist activity. What do you guys do, or do you do anything to try to mentally prepare yourself so that you can be in the moment and get as much information as you possibly can when the unknown occurs?
Yeah, I could say, as far as collecting evidence, because that's what Liam was talking about, collecting evidence. What we do is we actually keep a journal. So every single day we sit down and write down, and I know it sounds fantastic, but we actually write down in a journal every single day what we did, what time we did it, what we ate. I know it's like, whoa, that's a lot. So in fact, we can look back 5 years ago and see what we did on a certain day of a certain year and know exactly what we did. Oh yeah, and we start to remember those events. And so that's very important when we're talking about synchronicity and looking at overlap phenomenon of dates and times and messages and things connecting. And in fact, speaking of that, the first time Zelia interviewed us about our book and talking about this phenomenon, it was January 24th, 25th, around that time. And that's so funny because January 25th was the time when this invisible entity came up behind her back. So we keep a journal. We can look back on it. And if something strange happens, we write it down. And it's old school, but it works. You know what I mean? It's old school. It's a journal. You know when you wrote it down, you have the date, you know exactly what you did. That's kind of what we do for record keeping. It's in writing. And so that's really important to us. But as far as preparing mentally, I don't know if I'm ever prepared mentally, but I guess it's been happening my whole life. So I'm kind of used to it. And I've just accepted the fact that I'm open to receiving information and receiving these experiences. And I know my wife feels the same way. I don't want to speak on her behalf, but yeah, what do you think, Laura?
Yeah, it's been happening through my entire life. So when it comes to being prepared, it's kind of almost, one of those, I don't know, it's kind of like, getting into the car and just driving or walking down the street. It just kind of comes naturally. So if something does happen, it's kind of, you're already prepared, or you've already gone through this before. So it's not usually scary. So I mean, just, yeah, I would just say it just comes naturally. We don't necessarily prepare ourselves.
No.
Like, we don't wake up in the morning and say, meditate and try to be able to center ourselves to be able to prepare just in case something happens.
Or create something. Yeah. We
Yeah.
don't do that. It just happens.
It either happens or it doesn't. And sometimes there's quite a bit of a space between, the times that it happens. It would be kind of like being a little paranoid and looking over your shoulder 24/7 if we had to be able to prepare ourselves every time.
Noting the time of day, noting the date, the time of year, noting the surrounding environment, whether there's alder trees, whether there's cedar trees, where are we standing? Are we near a river? That kind of stuff. That's all really important information that you write down. So I guess that's our preparation for any kind of presentation like today.
Right.
Speaking with you, we have that body of knowledge. So there you go.
Well, the journal idea is a great idea, and I actually was keeping a journal for a while. It was geared toward the paranormal, toward trips and whatever, and I forgot about it. And then I dug it out one time, and I thought, holy cow! I documented. We were in the TNT area with a group of people, and some really strange stuff was going on. And a couple of the women were experiencing the same things separately, or sensing the same thing. And I documented it all. I completely forgot that I had done that. So that's I don't think I could be as meticulous as you guys, but it would be a good idea to do that on investigations or certain trips that focus on that. What about you, Liam? Is there anything? I know you've been in some bizarre situations, and you must have considered some of the stuff that could happen. Is there anything you do to kind of stay alert and to try and be in the moment?
So what I do, guaranteed before every investigation that we do, I always prepare myself through meditation, but it's a special kind of meditation because I meditate and meet with my spiritual guides and also spiritual animals. So I meet with them and I go into like a state of mind. Nothing comes out of my mouth, but I'm actually having a conversation in my head with them. We go through all kind of we kind of like get a board out or something and say, what happens if this happens, can you step in sort of thing. It's kind of like a organized I don't know, like formation. I go through that every time before I investigate to prepare myself spiritually, mentally as well. Those guides step in when I need them to, if things are getting too rough or too heavy or too physical even sometimes. We do have those backup things in place. I always take as well a tiger's eye. I always carry the tiger's eye around with me. The stone, that is, not an actual tiger's eye. But I do believe in carrying stones as well, things like that. Yeah, it's just certain ways of preparing myself for that situation, because myself, I never ever read up on a location before I go into it. I never look into history. I never look into anything that's happened there, for the simple reason I want it to all come to life in front of me, whether that's spirit coming to talk to me, or using equipment, or things like that, and giving us information using Ouija boards. I want all that information directly from the spirit, and then I can relay that information back to the owner or whoever's there that knows the history of the place, to confirm our findings, to make sure that they are 100% accurate and genuine. That's because that's a way of testing myself as well, to make sure that I'm still, active in the spiritual world, and know that I can still talk to them and communicate with them. It gives me my own evidence as well as solid evidence to everyone else.
Well, it kind of makes sense. It's the people that do remote viewing, they use a blind target. They use a series of coordinates, and so they have no idea what they're going to be viewing. If they did, if it was front loaded, the imagination takes over. So it makes a lot of sense that you, Liam, go into a situation where you just don't know anything about it, so that you can receive the impressions more cleanly than you would otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you've got something in the back of your mind that you've read or seen or something like that, then that's already in your mindset. So that then spires into something else, and then you get this bigger picture. But and you can sort of work from that, rather than when you go in blank, you've absolutely got nothing to work with. You've literally got a blank board, and you have to literally get your own information, which that's the part I love, because it's so easy nowadays, because everyone's got a cell phone, and you can go on the internet and look at this and look at that, and there's so many books out there you can read, etc., and things like that. But if you do that, you're cheating yourself in a way. So I find you go in there doing it yourself without looking at these bits of information, coming out with the information you get. You might not get everything, which is fine. You might only get bits, or you might get nothing at all. But regardless whether you've got nothing or if you've got everything, you've gone there and you've experienced it for yourself, and you've tried to make that contact and make that communication with that other universe.
So Liam and I have Liam and I and Laura have had connections, through our friendship, and I wanted to bring those up because they're very interesting. Speaking of supernatural phenomenon happening over thousands of miles and great distances between each other, we had a very interesting phenomenon with Liam. I dreamed about, had an experience with, I guess you'd call it one of his spirit guides, kind of visited us, and it was before I really knew much about Liam's personal spiritual world. And I don't know how much he's going to reveal or wants to talk about that, but we had a dream, we had an experience with that spirit guide that visited us here in the Seattle area. And then we talked to Liam afterwards, and it was very interesting because the details of this dream kind of experience really matched up with his personal history. The other thing is, there's another friend named Ben, who has a very similar spiritual path, who used to live near Sherwood Forest, and I guess he's a demonologist. He works with some of the universities nearby there. Him and his wife, they do medieval reenactments and whatnot. We had a very strange encounter with one of his, I guess you'd call it, spirit guardians over a long distance. So Liam, would you like to share some of that information and just talk a little bit about you don't have to. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but
no, of course. You go for it. You tell them exactly what you experienced, and I don't mind. I'm quite happy to share information, because obviously information is knowledge, and knowledge is very good to share with others. So yeah, my spirit animal is a wolf, which is really strange because that's what we were talking about earlier. The wolf men. or dogmen, or whatever you want to call them. And believe it or not, my wolf is quite a large wolf as well. And he has been over a couple of times to go to Bob and look at obviously protecting Bob and Laura. When he senses danger, he does go over there and protect them, which is really nice. And Bob's seen that a couple of times. He's seen an outline and images, he's told me, which is pretty amazing. He also had an experience as well. I don't know if you remember, Bob, but you spoke about my grandfather as well.
Yep, I do. I remember. Yep.
Yeah. He seen an image. It was like a dream of my grandfather in his little sort of like shed area, and things like that, a little hut at the bottom of the garden sort of thing, which my granddad had one of those when he was alive. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he's obviously there in spirit because he's been connecting through Bob, and through myself, and it's really weird because he wouldn't have known Bob in life, and he's never been to America, but he somehow connected through Bob and through time, and obviously a long distance. It's just really interesting how Bob does it. I don't know how he does it, and I don't really want to know how he does it because some things are like magic. You don't want to know. You just want to keep the magic there. So it's amazing how he does it. But some of the information that he's told me, and also some of the information I told him as well, like in regards to the piano. Do you remember the piano?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that conversation we had about the piano and things like that, and it's just really weird. Me and Bob have got this really. It's a long distance because obviously I'm in the UK, he's in the States, but we've got this really strong bond and strong connection across all that way, and we've never met in person, which I'm hoping to change soon. It's just absolutely incredible what he can do, and how his talents lie.
Well, Laura and I also saw a black dog figure down by the basement door. This was during the day. This was during waking hours. It wasn't a dream. And Laura saw this figure, dashing about the basement door, and it was a very large black dog, and it was transparent. It was just there, and then it was gone. It was like a shadow, but it was very large. And then later we found out, Laura and I both found out, that we had seen Ben. Is it Winfield? Anyway, we won't
Winfield.
talk about it too much in detail, but we know that this I guess you'd say, is it a black shuck? I mean, I don't know. Is it it's from the UK, whatever this spirit is.
Yeah, the black shuck, right.
It came and checked us out. It kind of, and this was crazy. And he was really surprised. Ben, if you ever get him on your show, he was really surprised that we saw his guardian or his spirit animal or whatever you want to call it. And we saw it, and he said it just came to check us out, kind of like how Liam and I have that connection. So Ben is another person in the UK that for some reason we just connected. We dialed in on the same frequency. I don't know how it happened, but it happened.
Now, you guys have never met in person, right?
Never.
No, never.
Okay. It'd be very cool. I've never met my producer, Andy Mercer, either. That'd be fun, actually, someday to actually meet people after becoming friends through cyberspace, essentially. We'll get back to some of your experiences, but I did have kind of a general question, and what triggered it was when Bob, when you said that it seemed like these events with the invisible entity might have been triggered or manifested when you were singing the song.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, it seems like that kind of thing or ritual or whatever seems to trigger some of the phenomena. I was watching an episode of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch the other day, and they had a Jewish rabbi come on, and he did I don't know if he did a chant or a prayer or whatever, but that in itself seemed to trigger some of the phenomena on the ranch. Now it was stuff that they were picking up with instrumentation, frequencies and so forth. Also, I think of in the book by Nick Redfern, Three Men Seeking Monsters. The one of the guys that he went around with, Richard Freeman, would do these experiment with these incantations, and it seemed to trigger phenomena. And lastly, I mentioned this Dr. Donald Ullman before, who actually went to the four corners of Loch Ness and the center of Loch Ness in a boat and did an exorcism. I'm not sure that Nessie needs to be exorcised, but nonetheless, he and a man named Ted Holliday, who's written several books on the Loch Ness monster, has began to believe that it was more of a psychic projection or phenomena than a flesh and blood creature. Anyway, something happened after the exorcism. It triggered all kinds of bizarre stuff. Something that looked like a tornado, a thumping on the beach. A beam of light coming through the window. It's kind of a long story. And then the next day, Ted Holliday sees something that looks like a man in black standing on the beach. So, do you have any feeling about ritual or some kind of a meditation or whatever that would manifest or help to trigger some of these events or phenomena?
I think in that on that sense, there's a lot of things to do with frequencies. So certain noises or certain sounds or even certain words or the way they're said can trigger something off. It's like, for example, when you're having a conversation with somebody, you can tell if they're in a good mood or a bad mood by just the sound of their voice. If they go, "Yeah, I'm okay," they're obviously not okay. If they go, "Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm fine," then obviously they're okay. It's the way they say things, and the tone of voice, and the frequencies of whether it's high pitch, low pitch, etc. So I do, I do believe that can trigger phenomenon in any kind of way, whether it's spiritual or physical or parallel universes, etc. I do believe that it can be a huge factor, whether it's through music, voices, words, or even certain people as well. Certain people can trigger things, because certain people do carry attachments and things like that. So certain people can trigger things off in a positive way, but also in a negative way as well. It's very much like humans, as I mentioned there. It's very much like us. We have that same sort of effect on everyday life, and I do believe that the spiritual world and the cryptid world and everything else does have a similar way of life to that.
Does it have to do with human consciousness? Does the focus does the ritual or the ceremony or whatever, does that help to focus human consciousness to the point where it triggers some of these things?
I believe it can do. Human consciousness will play a part in the activity that you get, because I mean, we've seen it on investigations, for example, where one night we could have a room full of pure positive people that want things to happen, and they focus their mindset on things happening, and things do happen. But then also we've had it where you've almost got a room full of people like that, but then you've got one negative person in the room, and it kind of lets the side down, and it kind of the negative kind of pushes away the positive, and you get a flat night, you get absolutely nothing. So it's all to do with, it's definitely, that plays a huge part in it, human consciousness. Definitely.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah.
It also, I think it has something to do with, during the time of our experiences, my husband was singing in the ancient language, and drumming at the same time. And around here, in a lot of different areas all over the world, I mean, you've had people that have tuned into certain sounds, certain I don't know how to describe it, I guess certain I don't know.
Vocables and
Yeah.
sounds. But in this case, it was very specific to the language. So when you're singing in the language, of the land that you're standing on, that it's a really easy explanation of why it conjures something. So over in UK, for instance, like, you're speaking English and there's an uninterrupted history of the development of the English language that goes back, thousands of years. English developed over thousands of years. But in this this landscape that we're standing on, the cultural language was interrupted. But when you evoke that language, when you're singing that language again after it has been interrupted, in fact, it was punished for speaking that language. And it was illegal up until like the 1970s to speak the language aloud. So, it makes absolute complete sense that if you start singing in that language, the ancient language of the land that you're standing on, that you're going to awaken or conjure something. So,
yeah. And again, like with human history, anything that has been stifled or kept in a box or not allowed to be able to do what obviously comes natural to human beings, communication, that sort of thing. Once something is kept hold so tightly, and then what happens? People have to kind of break free, and I think that a lot of some of the spiritual sense, I think that's kind of sort of the same thing. Something that is not allowed to do, but is wanting to be woken up and recognized. So when these things actually happen, when the language is spoken or sung, or the drum comes out, it's one of those things I think that just awakens.
It's a release. They're like, thank you, someone's listening, and they want to be heard. These voices want to be heard, and so finally. I mean, just imagine, gentlemen, that for thousands of years there was a certain religion practiced here, and then it all came to a stop. It wasn't allowed anymore. It was illegal, and so all these supernatural things, these beings that were fed, they were fed during ceremony. They're not fed anymore. They're hungry. They're out in the woods. It used to be that elders would go out and feed these entities and sing to them and speak to them. And now that's not allowed anymore. So then finally, when you start to sing that again, oh my God, those spiritual beings are so happy and overjoyed that you're recognizing them again. So of course they're going to show up. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I wonder, this makes me think of, do you guys have any feelings about channeling? I don't know if Liam, in your with your abilities, I don't know if you've ever done channeling per se, or when I look at the broad spectrum of channeling, I find it really fascinating. I don't think all channeling is created equal. I think some of it is maybe possibly just be gibberish from the unconscious or the collective unconscious, but there's other channeling that seems to come in at a higher vibration. And with the work that all of you guys do you have any feeling, or do you ever use channeling in your work?
I do use channeling quite a lot in my work. I actually can channel spirits through myself, but I only do it with team members there, because team members have to bring me out of it. You see,
Okay.
it's not something that I can bring myself out of. I need someone else there to bring me out of it. But the way channeling works is I have to either get someone to record me or audio record or something like that, because when the spirit enters my body, when I allow it to enter the body, it basically has to go through all my spirit guides first, so it has to pass checks to make sure that it's safe, so it's not going to harm me in any way, etc. And then it goes into my body, and it basically I allow it to use my hands and also my tongue for speaking, etc. And things like that, and potential showing images of the mind as well. So I allow it to do those three things. When people ask it questions, and it can give immediate answers because it's channeling through me. It's using a physical body, so it's able to sort of give the answers immediately, rather than when we have to wait for the glass to move on a Ouija board or something like that. But channeling also does take a lot out of you because it takes a lot of your energy. It takes a lot of physical energy to do it, as well as mental energy as well. And spirits often come through. I've had many spirits come through my body and have full-blown conversations. They also can talk in their native tongues, which is amazing because obviously I don't know I'm doing it. It's just I'm completely not conscious, so I'm like completely out of it. And they're using my body to do that. So it's definitely an interesting piece of definitely an interesting part, but not everyone finds it something that they're comfortable with seeing or experiencing. So that is only literally done in private parties between very, very close friends and people that I completely trust.
So
It's
are you when you're doing this, are you channeling entities or spirits that are in that locale, people that have died or whatever, or do you ever channel? We've heard of the classic ones like Ramtha and Ashtar and Ra and so forth. Do you ever channel anything that is supposed to be sort of a highly evolved spirit being or whatever? What kind of channeling do you do?
So I can channel absolutely anything that comes my way, whether it's a higher spirit, whether it's even on angel platforms and things like that, and also lower down platforms such as potential evil spirits, etc. Like demons and things like that. That D word gets thrown around quite a lot. So I can go from one extreme to the other and channel those kind of levels. But I tend to channel more of people connected to the place that we're at, because I want as much information as we can get. So I tend to go on more of like a human platform more often than not. But I can go to higher levels or like I say, the darker side of things as well. But I really enjoy doing what I do. But it does take a lot of energy, and like I say, you need the right support network around you as well, just in case things do turn nasty, because it can.
That sounds a little scary.
Yeah, we go into a little dark side sometimes, but it's fine. I mean, it's all safely. It is a safe environment. We try and make it as safe as possible. But I enjoy it because we've gained loads of information in the past from doing experiments like that, and we've been able to get the information absolutely spot on as well, with dates, times, things that have happened, people that live there, names, things like that. Bob will tell you. I didn't do channeling with him, obviously, but he was showing a place around where he lives. I think it was an old cafe or something. And I even gave him the name of the person who died in there. That was just literally through connecting, through a computer screen. So that I think it was a little girl that died in there or something. It's been a long time since.
Oh yeah. That was in the town of Snohomish.
Yeah.
And Liam would have. Okay, this is the craziest thing. Just give you a little pat on the back there and affirmation. There was no way that Liam could have known the name of this young lady who passed away. But I was standing in front of the restaurant in Old Snohomish, and he described the young woman, what she looked like, and then he described her name. And actually, I have that right here. But he actually started with the initials, and then he actually said her whole name. And I was like, oh my God. And then he said she fell down the stairs and her neck was broken. And in fact, everything was absolutely correct.
So the thing that fascinated me about channeling is that when you look at the literature, some of the same names keep showing up. Now, everybody's heard of Ashtar. That guy gets more FaceTime, so to speak, than anybody. But you wonder, and there's a lot of deception going on too. So you can't always, I'm sure you know, Liam, that you can't always be, if somebody says there's somebody coming through, it may not be that entity or whatever. But when you look at the belief in the Space Brothers, George Hunt Williamson and his group, they channeled a lot of people. Before him was George Van Tassel under Giant Rock. And then there was, the Law of One, Ra, the Egyptian R.A. Ra, with Carla Ruckart was the channeler, and Don Elkins was the facilitator. And these are people that didn't know each other, and it's like generational differences, yet some of the same entities, in quotes, Space Brothers or whatever, would come through. And there would be situations where they would say, well, we can't really, manifest to you. You can't really see us because we're on a different vibration or whatever. But if you step outside your house, or it was Van Tassel lived under Giant Rock in the California desert. If you step outside and look to the west or look over your house, you'll see our craft, or you'll see this light or whatever. And sure enough, they would step out and they would see some kind of a manifestation of something. So I don't know what was going on, but again, a lot of the same names of entities kept showing up. And of course, a lot of the messages were always very kind of flowery, positive, and so forth. A lot of them had to do with warnings about, using radiation and that kind of thing. And they would claim that the green fireballs they were seeing in the 50s and 60s were the Space Brothers counteracting the nuclear fallout. Well, I don't know. But just Bob and Laura, have you guys ever dabbled any with channeling or have any opinions about it?
As far as channeling goes, occasionally I will be, speaking, and then I'll say something, and I don't know where I read it, where I heard it, where I learned it, and for some reason it just comes out of my mouth, and it feels as if somebody is relaying information. And I go back through my notes and I say, man, did I read that somewhere? What book was that from? And then it happens a lot. And it feels as if someone is speaking through me. I know my wife does that too occasionally. And that's, I guess, my closest form of channeling is just sudden revelations during speech. I'll just be talking and it'll just come out of my mouth. I'm like, wow.
Almost like an inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like stuff that sounds, very, and then you think about what was just said, and you're like, that makes a lot of sense. And how did I know that? Where did I learn that from? And it's as if, and especially when I'm working with wood, because I work with, I carve a lot. So I carve red cedar and I carve different types of trees and different species of wood. And there's a belief that there is, information that comes out of certain species of trees in this area. So I feel like when I'm touching a certain type of wood, especially like red cedar, that information is channeled through that physical matter, that wood. Alder has a different spirit than cedar, and you have hemlock. You have all these different species of wood. But I found that when I'm working with cedar all day or working with fir all day, Douglas fir, sometimes I'll just have like, whoa, what the hell is going on? And it'll just come out of my mouth. It's like something else is speaking through me. So there's my version of channeling.
So
go ahead.
As for me, I get it through dreams. So I will become another person. So I'm not myself in my dream. I'll be somewhere else. I will see through somebody else's eyes, or almost kind of like I'm floating above them and I can see down and I can see everything that's going on and who they're talking to. But they can't see me. They're unaware that I'm even there. So we really try to be able to not, but just because we both have experienced spiritual sickness. So we've both, at some point in our life, we've gone through a certain time where it almost kind of, it's not just good or bad spirits that come through. Sometimes they can be extremely dangerous, and we don't try but the times that we have, it's made our life miserable.
Oh, that's too bad.
And yeah, and the strange thing is that, you know, I think that both of us, the reason why we're okay with not really coming up with some sort of protection before we go somewhere or meet somebody is because I think my husband and I, we get the strength from each other. Just the kind of bond that we have. So it's that we are each other's protection. So whatever. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just a question on that, Laura. You know these dreams where you say like they can't see you, but you can see them. Are they on a different plane or a different platform, or how does that work?
That's what I've always been kind of wondering, because I'll meet that person later on and I'll know that the event has already happened.
So it's like a deja vu moment.
The thing is that that's kind of what I was talking to Bob about. I think it was like about 2 months ago. I was talking to him about the difference between deja vu and knowing for a fact that this event has already happened, or the event is going to happen. I mean, it's not even a fine line. It is a very distinct. Deja vu is over here, and you know, this other feeling of just knowing is completely a different feeling.
So do you feel it in your gut or your mind, or how do you...
It's almost, yeah, I would probably say it's probably close enough to a gut feeling. That it's like, again, like these events are going to happen, especially if I meet the person face to face, or at least I've noticed that it happens and it gets stronger once I am close enough to that person, maybe about 3 feet or so. You know, I'm kind of sensitive in that way, where I'll know somebody and I'll just know right away, yeah, stay away from that guy. He's bad news, or yeah, she's trouble, or you know, it's just one of those things. Is I don't know if it's I wouldn't say it's really a gut feeling. It's just it's everything. It's absolutely everything. It's mind and spirit and heart, and you just know through and through your entire body that this person has and will do certain things, or they have done it. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense, yeah. Sorry to interrupt your flow there, but I was just intrigued.
No, I'm glad we're getting the back and forth from you guys, because you guys have been friends for a long time and really asked some good questions. There are times when I have said some things to my wife that I wish I could blame on Ashtar or somebody and say it wasn't me, it was that rascally Ashtar saying that stupid stuff. But I guess she wouldn't buy that. You know, it's interesting when you, Laura, when you talked about the dreams and being somebody else. There's a book, another book. I'm a guy that reads books and can refer to books because I don't have the experiences. But Valley of the Skookum by Sally Shepherd Wolford. She recounted the experiences that she had when they moved to Ording, Washington, back in about 73. And her daughter, she has a famous daughter, Autumn Williams. Autumn was between 3 and 6 years old, and they experienced Bigfoot there. But they also experienced a great deal of high strangeness, UFOs, orange orbs, disappearing, glowing Bigfoots, and so forth. But Sally would have these dreams where she had apparently Native American roots, and they were very, very vivid, very lucid. I highly recommend the book. There's another, the thing that triggered this was there was a, and you guys may not be able to relate to this at all, but there was an incident where they were hearing essentially wood knocking. And when they found the source of it, they were looking at a tree that seemed to be making the noises by itself somehow. They didn't know how it was doing it or whatever, but there wasn't anything hitting the tree, at least visible. And I wondered if you guys have ever heard of that or ever encountered anything like that.
I'll let you go, Bob.
Tree knocking.
Yeah, tree knocking. But this was, I mean, they were standing there looking at the tree. They heard the knocks. There wasn't anything striking it. It was just it's the only time I've ever heard of that when it was reported in the book, The Valley of the Skookum by Sally Wolford.
Oh yeah, well that actually that very much supports the idea of this interdimensional being, you know. So yeah, I mean that kind of matches what we were talking about earlier, hearing this large bodied figure behind us, but we couldn't see anything there. It's the same kind of thing. So yes, we hear a lot of the stories. Now in this area, the reference is the Stick Indians or the Stick
Yes, tell us about that.
Yeah, so the word skookum, that is the actual word for the mischievous spirits that you're referring to. Now, you talk about the Ape Canyon incident of 1924. I'm sure you're familiar with the Ape Canyon incident, where it was referred to these beings blinking in and out of reality. They're not quite there, you know. They're throwing rocks, but then they disappeared. The rocks are, you know, they hear the sound of rocks, but they don't find any rocks. You know, the creatures are
let me just stop you for a minute, Bob. It's interesting because a lot of times that story is told, but they don't report the higher strangeness aspect of it. So I'm glad you're bringing out the fact that these things were not visible all the time. Go ahead.
Yes, and so that's from what I understand in written history, that's one of the first times it was reported as to being interdimensional and blinking in and out of reality. Now, how that relates to what we're talking about is the skookum. That is that a lot of people say skookum, but it's actually skookum.
Skookum. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, and then skookum. If you just say skookum, that actually is a Chinook jargon word that means strong or swift or of high quality. So, like in the Pacific Northwest here, if you had a pile of 2x4s and they were just beautiful, straight grain, and they were perfect, they looked beautiful, ready to frame a house, you'd say they were skookum. But if you want to talk about an entity, a mischievous spirit, a stick person or a stick Indian, you'd say skookum. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, that's good. I think we're going to start to wrap things up, but if you want to go around, if there's another story or incident or anything that each one of you want to relate before we close down, please go ahead. And Liam, do we want to start with you?
Okay. I mean, there's many stories that I can tell, but one in particular is more in regards to like an animal type thing. I was investigating a prison, and I'm actually going back to this prison in August, so I'm looking forward to that. It's the first time I've been back since this incident. So we was wrapping things up at the end of the night, as you do, and the prison fence started to kind of rattle. There was a rattling sound. So we kind of went out and had a look. There was no wind, no nothing. So it was quite a still night. And the fence was violently shaking. It was really violently shaking. And then this black figure, it was pure black, but it had, and I know it sounds like I've been watching a lot of movies, but it actually had red eyes. It suddenly jumped from the fence. It was on the top of the fence. It suddenly jumped all the way to the floor and literally crawled across the floor and down to the bottom of the stairs. And we was at the top of the stairs. We decided to run in the prison and shut the door behind us because we didn't know what it was. And then suddenly I radioed across and said, look, there's something here. We were just collecting things. I said, there's something here. And they come running over straight away because they didn't know. And by the time they got there, it only took them like a couple of minutes or so to get there. By the time they got there, it disappeared. It just vanished into thin air. But this thing, I seen it clearly. It had red eyes. It crawled, and it had teeth as well. You could physically see teeth. And someone else was with me at the time as well, so they seen exactly the same thing. But it kind of relates to like what we've been talking about like certain cryptids and things like that, and the way things appear out of nowhere, when you're not looking for it, especially. It just appeared to us. It made its presence very much known. It actually struck fear into us as well, because we wasn't ready. It just completely vanished, which was interesting, because I've never been back there since, and like I say, I'm going back there in August.
And you're going back, and you saw something with red eyes and teeth. I don't know. I think, Liam, I might take up cost accounting instead. But it's just
definitely. But it's just one of those things that we'll probably never see it again. It'll probably never happen again.
Well, that's a good point. So many of these things. Again, I've been listening to the Skinwalker Ranch book again, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, on Audible. That's why I'm making all these references. But so many. I mean, here's the scientific team, which set up the trailer and all the observation and whatever, and they had hundreds of incidents, and almost nothing was repeated. So that's kind of goes with what you're saying is, now you never know. Maybe we'll see this thing again. But and hopefully it doesn't actually bite.
I hope not, because I fancy keeping my limbs.
And Bob and Laura, do you have any other stories you'd like to give us in parting?
Well, we're just so thankful to be on this podcast and be able to chat with y'all. And we're looking forward to this weekend. We've got some upcoming things happening. We'll just tell you about real quick. This weekend is a Lynch conference, David Lynch conference, and it's all about Twin Peaks: The Return. And so our group, I play music, so our group provided music for the event on June 19th, June 20th. We pre-recorded our performance, and it's music that's has something to do with the themes of Twin Peaks, and especially The Return and anything Lynchian or David Lynch. So that's really exciting. Then we also have something coming up on July 15th through the 18th. It's the North Bend Film Festival, and we've got actors and filmmakers from all over the world that are convening. And this year, they're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Donnie Darko. I don't know if you know that movie, but it has to do with time travel and loops and quantum reality and all that fun stuff. So okay. The director of Donnie Darko is part of this event, and all 4 days, July 15th through the 18th, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, my wife and I are giving tours of North Bend. It's called Strange North Bend Walking Tour, and it includes the cemetery, it includes places of true crime, it includes Twin Peaks film sites, the Vanishing film sites. There are a few other films that were filmed here. There were other productions. And it talks about the history of Hollywood, coming to town for the first time and that kind of thing. But it also deals with the paranormal and the prehistory. So that's happening in the middle of July. So we have Lynch this coming weekend, actually, starting on Saturday. Then we have the North Bend Film Festival. And then speaking of Emily and Natalie Campano, we're going to be working with Emily some more. She's so into the paranormal. She actually has a show right now called Crimes That Changed America. It's on Fox. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, but if you look up Crimes That Changed America, she covers groundbreaking crimes that changed the laws or changed society or changed culture, the repercussions. And so look up Emily Campano. You spell her last name Campagno, and her sister's Natalie, and she was in Abominable in 2006. So look up those folks. Just a little plug for them. They're doing some great work. And as far as anything else, Laura, what else do we want to talk about?
Give us any other contact information, and you have a book out too, right?
Yep. We have a book called The Odd Man Up on Amazon Kindle. And you can contact us, Bob Antone at hotmail.com, or Laura Hidden Northwest Tours at outlook.com.
Outlook, yeah.
Or, yeah, okay, that'll work. Or you can look us up on social media. You can find Hidden Northwest Tours. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram.
Patreon.
Patreon. Yes, that's right. We're on Patreon.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a site for some of our hardcore fans who want some exclusive content. That's how it usually works with Patreon. And you basically
tell us about the exclusive content to whet their appetite so that they want to
yeah,
join up.
okay. So a lot of times, as you know, on certain social media platforms, we're not allowed to speak about certain things that might be controversial or perceived as offensive or,
sure.
On Patreon, on a private setting, you can discuss some of these things that might be borderline offensive, and people can have open discussions and review the material without being shut down or censored or that kind of thing. So that's the advantage of Patreon. But again, it's true crime. Sometimes we have details of horrific violence, or sometimes it's just things that are just kind of culturally, I guess, off.
Okay.
And so people are able to explore those ideas in connection to paranormal phenomenon. Of course, there's research and materials and crime scenes. We go back to law enforcement interview certain police officials that were there and get the inside scoop on certain famous crimes and stuff like that in this area. And then we also go and re-interview, witnesses, experiencers, Bigfoot, UFOs, et cetera, et cetera. We make videos, photos, and there's all kinds of documents. That's patreon.com/hidden NW Northwest Tours. Hidden Northwest Tours on Patreon. There you go.
So you get a lot of good stuff there for your extra buck. And Liam, tell us about how to contact you and your show and anything else you want to promote.
Yeah, sure. So you can contact Afterlife Solutions through Facebook. We have a Facebook page. You also can contact us through YouTube as well. We have a YouTube channel, and they're both named the same, Afterlife Solutions. So you can find us through there. As I say, we have got some events in the pipeline, and like I say, I'm going back to that prison in August. So I'm really, really excited for that. Also, we do have a show coming up, Bob. We have a show with a very young man who's just written a book himself. His name is Anthony Tyler. He's just written a book, and it's just came out. So we're excited to interview him. That's going to be on the Sunday, not this Sunday coming, the Sunday after. Which makes that the 20. One second. That makes it the 27th. We're interviewing him. That's going to be an amazing interview. That's going out live as well. So do look out for that. That's going to be on the Facebook page. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. That's going to be super exciting. But if you do have any questions or anything, or any evidence that you want to show myself or get my team to look over, any listeners out there, or anything that we can help with, or any activity that you're experiencing, please get in touch through those forms of contact. My number is on there as well, on the Facebook page, so you can contact me by phone. I'm also available on my personal profile on Facebook, and also I've got a personal profile on Twitter and Instagram as well, and that's Liam Cupkovic. Yeah, guys, get in touch. Just before I do go this evening, though, I do want to thank Steve for the amazing show. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for Bob and Laura as well for your amazing experiences and stories. I always learn something new from you guys, so thank you for that. And thank you, a huge thank you to your team as well, Steve. Your producer and people that edit and do all the background work, etc. Absolutely amazing. Thank you for having us on. And for all your listeners out there, I just want to always say it. I always say it on my show, so it's one of my sayings. Don't be normal, guys. Be paranormal.
No problem here being too normal. Listen, thank you. It's my pleasure, and my team is actually Andy Mercer. He does it. The only reason that I get out on the air is because of his efforts. But listen, guys, I really appreciate this. Bob, Laura, and Liam, great stories. I think we should probably do this again sometime, because there's a lot more for you guys to talk about. A lot more experiences and things that you. And things that you've considered, a lot of really great ideas.
Well, you
So-
know for a fact, Steve, you're always welcome on our show.
Okay,
You can come
sounds
back
good.
anytime, and we're more than gladly have you on, because you was amazing last time, and I still believe there's a lot to be learned from yourself.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And again, great show, guys. Thank you so much for all of you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted by the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank our fearless leaders, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, here at the network. Andy Mercer, in his capacity as co-host and producer for the High Strangeness Factor. Brian Zeller composed the excellent music for the show. I can also be heard as a correspondent weekly on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files on this same network. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.